were some of your favorite authors as a teenager?
As a teenager, I had started to read adult books as a teenager because I'm old enough that there really wasn't that much YA when I was a teenager. So I had started reading, I was really into historical fiction, and I lived in England, so I read a lot of Jean Plaidy books. She wrote English historical fiction, and I read practically all of her books. I read all the Lord of the Rings. I was really into Tolkien, and I loved Animal Farm. Still is one of my favorite books of all time. I loved it. I'm very interested in politics. I actually write a political column as well as being an author, so Animal Farm just does it all for me. I'm trying to think what were some of my other favorites. I like Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know. I always hate these. What are your favorite author questions? Because I love so many books. It's really hard.
Well, on to another then hated question. What are some of your favorite contemporary young adult authors or books?
These are all my least favorite questions. Okay. One of my favorite books of all time is from contemporary author is Marcus Zuzak's The Book Thief. He's my major author crush on top of that. Which I think I've probably said in a lot of interviews, so it's no time. I just think it was a brilliantly written book, and the idea of having death as the narrator was just incredible. Yeah, so that I would say that's probably my favorite contemporary novel. But again, there's so many. I think teenagers today are so lucky because there's just so many great books written in the YA genre now.
Your webpage said that you've worked in a lot of jobs. Were you writing during that time, or was it until afterwards?
I wasn't writing fiction until afterwards, but one of the things when I speak in schools, I always start off my presentation by saying that no matter what you do, it's important to learn how to write well, because even when I was working on Wall Street as a financial analyst, which you would think was the most unwriterly creative thing you could possibly be doing, one of the things that always came up in my reviews, my salary reviews, was that I was always complimented on how well written my reports on stocks were. So the fact that I was a good writer helped me in my career. But it wasn't the kind of writing I really wanted to be doing. I always wanted to be a novelist. I just ended up not going down that track because the message I got growing up was, you got to make money, you got to make money. And I was also sort of got the message, you'll never make money as a writer. So
what drew you to the young adult genre in particular?
At first, when I first finally gave myself the permission to write, which was not until I was in my sort of having a midlife crisis in my late 30s, I started off writing a children's book, which was more middle grade, and then I wrote 200 pages of a grown-up book, and then decided no, because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to be writing, and then I ended up going back and finishing the middle grade. But I think really the reason why I write YA is because it's still, being a teenager is still very much a part of me, and I kind of joke it's like cheap therapy. So I guess I have a lot of unresolved issues.
Throughout the other interviews I've done, the young adult authors have really spoken about a young adult author community. Do you feel like there is that, and that you've had a good experience in that?
Oh, yes. In fact, I just got back from a writing retreat with a bunch of other, they weren't all young adults, some were picture book, but the young adult author community is just wonderful. They're very supportive of each other. They are so much fun to be around. I think part of it's because we all have that bit of, even though a lot of us are older and have kids of our own now, we still very much have that teen spirit inside. Even though in this older mom body, we still have a lot of teen spirit left in us, which my teenage daughter finds really mortifying, I have to tell you. Well, my son likes it better, but my daughter just thinks I'm the biggest embarrassment ever.
Coming to it late, what was the process like from finishing your first young adult book to actually seeing it published?
I was actually very fortunate in that it didn't take me very long to get my first book published, which I then compensated for by having a major second book blues. But I finished my first book, and I had gone to a SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Conference, and I had heard. My first book was actually middle grade, but it was about a girl who gives up being Jewish for Lent, and I knew it's called Confessions of a Closet Catholic, and I knew that someone who was going to buy that kind of book had to have a pretty quirky sense of humor. So I had heard Julie Strauss Gable speak at this SCBWI conference, and she seemed to have a pretty quirky sense of humor. So I thought, okay, I will send my manuscript to her. And I think that's really a lot of what it's about is, if you're looking for an agent or an editor, is making sure that you get your manuscript to someone who's going to be receptive to it. And I sent it to her, and then I sent it to a friend of mine who worked for HarperCollins, but in sales, and said, look, if you like it, can you pass it on to an editor? But if you don't, don't worry about it. And she did like it, and she did pass it on to an editor. And I being the self-confident person that I am, I actually expected to wait 6 months and hear rejections from both of them. But it was actually about a few weeks later, I got a phone call from Dutton saying that they wanted to buy the book. And my kids still remember me screaming and dancing around the kitchen. But I was really surprised. It was a very pleasant surprise.
With your second book especially, young adult books are often kind of, questioned about the content, will this be too, they're often banned, taken off the shelves. Do you ever worry about the reception of putting certain subjects in your books?
Oh, definitely. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. The book I'm actually just copy editing now, that's coming out next year, is called Wanna Go Private, and it's about a girl who gets involved with an internet predator. And the entire time I've been writing this book, that has been something I've been conscious of with every word that I write, because as part of my research, I worked closely with the FBI, and one of the